Hello and welcome to this video on what makes a mesh good or bad. In this video we will show two different styles of meshes. The first mesh on the right is the result of a laser scan. As we can see, this mesh has a lot of triangles, and when we start looking at the edges are not smooth straight lines as we would expect from a pattern piece. This is what's referred to as ragged edges. The mesh also has a number of holes in it. If we try to flatten this with ExactFlat, we will get a pattern, however, it will not resemble the pattern that you would expect. Although you can clean this up and fix this mesh in Rhino, it is best to use the tools that come with your 3D scanning package to fix up the mesh. Your 3D scanning software will have specialty tools for trimming the edges and for filling in holes and splitting up your mesh. The next mesh we're going to look at is the result of Rhino. This mesh was created by selecting multiple surfaces and using the Rhino mesh command. When we start looking at the mesh, it doesn't look too bad. However, if we start examining the mesh closely, we can see that we start having holes in the mesh. We can see right through the pieces. When we start looking at the triangles themselves, we have very, very large triangles that are right up next against very, very small triangles. We also have a collection of very high aspect ratio triangles. And that is, triangles that have very, very long edges along with triangles with very, very small edges. Also, because these were individual surfaces that were meshed, if we start examining the edges, we'll notice many instances where the triangulation along one edge does not correspond to the triangulation along the opposite edge. Although ExactFlat will do its best to sew these together, it's not always guaranteed for these to sew together. As such, this would be considered a bad mesh. An example of a good mesh is one that has uniform triangle distribution and all the seams or joints between the meshes are consistent. This mesh was also created using the Rhino mesh command. However, before we created a mesh, all of the surfaces were joined together to form one closed poly surface. We then used the Rhino mesh command and went into the detailed controls and manually specified maximum edge length. This is how we were able to create a grid of triangles and quads on the back and on the front. We have guaranteed that we have limited the ability of the mesher to create triangles with a very high aspect ratio by manually specifying the mesh parameters. Once you have your meshes created, it is best to use the Adaptive Remesher to reprocess your mesh and create an even further refined mesh for use with ExactFlat. The Adaptive Remesher will ensure that all the triangles are more or less equilateral, and that when a change in triangle size is required, a very smooth gradation of triangles is created to accommodate the change in triangle size. ExactFlat will only add additional triangles where additional detail is required, such as to accommodate complex curvature or very sharp angles in the mesh.